Only those who have the talents to become adventurers live in this world. The rest are treated like trash. Nagi is a dungeon gatekeeper. He was rejected as an adventurer just for being a gatekeeper. But little do they know that his backpack can carry anything. And because of this, he is able to clear dungeons using only dungeon drops. Without further ado, let's follow the journey of this young adventurer. The world the protagonist lives in is overflowing with countless dungeons. It was a vast dungeon world, along with countless treasures hidden deep inside them. Adventurers who conquer these dungeons claim the greatest wealth and fame in this world. However, not everyone can become an adventurer. Only the chosen few could grasp that title, and the protagonist walks through desolate lands, all alone with his large backpack. A guard looks at him with disdain, warning him that a dungeon lies ahead, and only those with permission can enter. He demands to know what's around his neck. It was shaped like a pouch. Nagi had become the adventurer's pouch. He was a white-tier porter. The guard complains while scratching his head, wondering how a porter could be later than the actual adventurers, and why was he alone, without other porters, since the association must have received the 50-coin advance. Nagi explains that he is the one and only exclusive porter costing 50 gold coins a day. The guard claps his hands together in disbelief, saying just one guy costs that entire amount. Then he yells, asking if Nagi thinks he looks like an idiot. This was a dungeon that should have at least 4 or 5 porters. He couldn't do anything alone, but if he has a mouth, he should answer, since he can't even carry his own luggage alone, let alone the dungeon loot. He questions if Nagi thinks he can adequately carry the burden of their lives. If he understood, he should go back to the Porter Association and ask for backup. Otherwise, they were going to turn the association upside down. Nagi comments that they have a lot of luggage for just 4 people, and the guard continues insisting he won't even be able to carry it. The young man reflects that reactions like this are pretty common, since he was a porter charging 5 times the standard rate. In these cases, instead of giving drawn-out explanations, it was more effective to just show them, taking his large backpack off his back. Nagi quickly loosens the rope, gently stuffing their backpacks inside. The adventurers gathered around the bonfire watch this happen. A blonde guy in the center says that must be some kind of magic backpack. 2 other adventurers ask where he got it, because it would be way better if they had one. Nagi apologizes, saying it's a unique bag that others can't use, and anyway, he wants to know if they'll hire him as a porter now. The blonde guy tells him to stop being so full of himself. Even with a porter's magic bag, it wasn't impressive. The other 2 guards apologized to Mr. Jeff. Jeffnum, leader of the United Dawn Wolf Party and a gold-tier swordsman, announces he will hire Nagi. However, he looks at his glove, warning him that he needs to earn that gold. If he doesn't do the work of 5 porters, he'd better be prepared for the consequences. Nagi wonders if this guy is the party leader. He seemed quite strict, as Jeff warns him to start preparing his gear for the expedition. But the protagonist just thinks that this is perfect for him. After all, he is a professional porter. Before this dungeon conquest ends, he'll leave them completely satisfied. The reason Nagi earns so much more than other porters wasn't simply due to his carrying skills. It was because of the impressive satisfaction of the adventurers. Adventurers who conquer dungeons face countless dangers, and traps can spring at any moment, not to mention enemy ambushes charging toward them. Jeff warns that they are coming. Then the group engages in a bloody battle with the goblins. Dungeon conquests are filled with countless variables, leading to considerable stress. Jeff demands to know if he hadn't ordered him to keep his guard up, questioning if it was because he was nervous. His colleagues begin arguing because of this. Nagi reflects that this was exactly why. He became the porter who targeted this niche market. So he sets his backpack down and calls out to the adventurers, telling them they must be hungry after so much relentless conquering, and that he brought snacks for them. The 2 are surprised by the food, questioning what that is and that spectacular smell. Nagi stands there with a plate of food, using the porter class secret skill, Dungeon Restaurant. The adventurers eat very quickly, commenting that it was so hot it seemed freshly made, and another says even the salad was fresh. He hasn't eaten anything but dried meat and meat as hard as a brick. It was incredible that the backpack had the ability to keep food fresh and even cook it. Nagi replies that it was something like that. The important thing was that they hadn't seen anything yet, opening the backpack further. His backpack becomes a large well of water, revealing an infinite hose. Nagi uses his porter skill, Arcadian Paradise, to create a bathtub. The bearded adventurer says he really is in a resort now, because it was like being in a hot spring in the middle of winter. But this definitely wasn't that scenario. Still, It was incredible. Jeff says that right at this moment, they are acting like they are on vacation, and doing something like this in the dungeon will only weaken discipline. But it was too warm to scold anyone, as he gets into the tub too. He says he has no choice but to acknowledge it. Honestly, he decided to try it, thinking he was just taking a risk, and there was no way this was worth 50 gold coins. He was planning to complain to the association and demand compensation, but for a carrier capable of such magic, 50 gold coins seems like a bargain. Nagi asks, isn't that just how dungeon conquests are? Visitors might think the difficulty lies only in dealing with powerful monsters, but in reality, it's the tension and environmental variables. Things like stomach aches from bad meals or failing due to lack of sleep weren't rare. A dungeon porter ultimately lives off adventures, and to make money, the adventurers must clear the dungeon. So he's been doing what he can to ensure the clear. It's nothing special. The bearded guy laughs at that, saying that's an understatement, since they rarely get this treatment even outside of dungeons. After receiving all this care, he feels energized and feels like he can easily handle any enemy waiting for them, standing up while warning him not to worry about clearing the dungeon. As he said, the conquest progressed without issue. They were already a skilled party that handled groups of monsters with ease. The problem was the boss monster, which is always full of unexpected variables. Jeff applies fire magic to his sword, commenting that it would be complicated. Therefore, they shouldn't give any openings, executing a high-pressure attack. The boss extends its hand as high as it can and then slams it onto the ground. The bearded guy fires arrows at it non-stop, activating his spiderweb skill. However, the boss uses its tail. It gets blocked by a shield. His shield bearer is thrown far away. At that moment, Jeff seizes the opportunity to move his sword, using swordsman's multiplication. With a simple movement, he slices off the tip of the boss's tail, but the monster prepares a blast, which is easily deflected by Jeff's swordsmanship. The swordsman keeps trying to advance. Nagi watches all of this from afar, commenting that this time the boss was a B-rank conquest target, the Zarkum lizard. Judging by the adventurer's skills so far, the chance of success was over 80%, and seems like a stable probability, but even 20% can't be ignored. A failed conquest means losing the porter's life, and that is not an option. Wondering if he should give a little help, Nagi reaches deep inside his backpack. Then he grabs a ball, saying that's where it was. The adventurer's attack power was sufficient, and creating even a single opening would be enough for a successful clear. Of course, it was wasteful to use such an expensive smoke mushroom, but right now, the priority was clearing the dungeon, so he had no other choice, moving it onto a belt because the point was to hit the target. That lizard continues advancing against the group of adventurers, ready to bite Jeff, who was defending himself. Nagi thinks that no matter how unpredictable the movements are, this was the time, moving the smoke upwards. Jeff smiles, advancing with the lizard distracted. Then he uses its back as a jumping platform, moving his sword toward the boss's head. The lizard finally opens its eyes, but ends up getting hit by the blow and having its head embedded in the ground. Jeff just stands up from there, congratulating the good work, and telling them to collect the loot. Well, the dungeon conquest ended well in the end, but the excitement lasted only briefly. The atmosphere quickly soured, and the reason was the meager rewards. From the boss monster, there should have been at least 20 B-grade magic stones, but only 5 dropped. Furthermore, the rest was treated as trash. To make matters worse, this dungeon consisted mainly of common monsters like goblins. In other words, comparing the cost and effort of this conquest with the rewards, it was a complete loss for the party. To make matters worse, they have to split these meager rewards among the 4 of them. Maybe that's why the joy of clearing the dungeon vanished, and the atmosphere grew tense. Even dividing the loot became a touchy subject, but Nagi wondered what he could even say. Since this was the business of adventuring, it was none of his concern. Porters got a fixed salary no matter how much they earned. So before the situation got worse, he decided to wrap things up. He pulled out 2 bottles of booze, thanking the adventurers for their hard work. He offered them a drink, figuring they must be thirsty. Jeff remarked that he even takes care of their post-party needs. The smoke bomb he threw at the boss had been their biggest stroke of luck in the dungeon. Nagi admitted he was caught. He just gave a little help with his modest skills. Another guard approached, saying the more he saw, the more impressed he got. This bunch of youngsters kept producing endless wonders. Nagi wondered why the mood seemed to be taking a strange turn, until something hit the bottle in his hand. An arrow stopped in the rock behind him. Nagi wondered what that was until another arrow approached. Then he dodged it with relative ease, complaining that this was bullshit. He wanted to know what they were doing. The bearded guy said it looked like he missed. He was trying to end it all at once without any pain, but he should think about it, since adventuring was a job where you risk your life. and the results can't be a total loss. The guard told him not to hold a grudge against them, since they were also in trouble with paying their taxes. Honestly, a bag like that was too much for a carrier. Nagi wondered if it would really be like this. A dungeon porter's job usually ends in losing their life in the middle of the journey. Even if they took his life, they could just say he lost it to goblins, and no one would even find it strange, since no matter how hard he tried, he was just a tool. The expressions of those who once appreciated his efforts immediately turned towards someone looking at the loot, but he wasn't surprised, much less embarrassed. This was a common occurrence in this world. In a place where your job is determined from birth, the treatment received by carriers was the lowest rank. This never changed, and never will. When he first gained this skill from the bag, the looks of contempt from people were sharp. A receptionist warned that with this ability, he could not register as an adventurer. She had already told him several times that he should go to the transport area. If he really wanted to participate in dungeon missions, he must register as a carrier. Thus, Nagi thought the world decided he couldn't become an adventurer since it classified him as a porter. These guys must have thought the same way. A guard said that if he understood, he should hand over everything he had and go to hell, then advanced, calling him a useless bag carrier. Nagi dodged the blow, thinking that this decision didn't belong to him to decide, opening his eyes wide now. From inside his bag, the young man pulled out a sword and deflected the blow. The guard wondered how he managed to do that. Nagi planted his foot on the ground, advancing at an absurd speed without even drawing the sword from its sheath. Then he hit the guard with the hilt of the sword. The bearded guy asked what the hell that was. Nagi pulled an axe from inside his bag, throwing it randomly into the air, and thus cutting the strings of the bearded guy's crossbow. That man got surprised by this. Jeff wondered how this was possible, because Dolph had really been taken down. Then he got enraged by this, asking what the hell this was, and if they couldn't put an end to him at once, so the two advanced. Nagi took a hose from inside the backpack, using it to stop them from approaching and making the bearded guy retreat thanks to the temperature. Then, without wasting a second, he saw a battle thread while advancing with the sword, splitting the bearded guy in the middle with a cut. The chubby one got scared by this, trying to run but getting hit by a punch and thus being thrown far away. Nagi just kept a cold expression on his face. Jeff noticed his friend was defeated, getting completely shocked and asking if he really defeated 3 adventurers alone. That was impossible since he was just a white rank, wanting to know who the hell he was. Nagi replied that he is just a dungeon porter. After the events inside the dungeon, Nagi stood outside. He quickly realized something was coming. In this case, it was a carriage. So he waved, shouting that it finally arrived there. A woman got out of the carriage, asking if he was the registered carrier, Nagi, because she heard about a crime occurring inside the dungeon, so she came to investigate, as Petra the inspector. But she wanted to know what exactly this was, with the 3 tied up and with swollen faces. Questioning what happened inside the dungeon, Nagi just replied that instead of explaining, it was better to hear directly from there. Suddenly a voice started coming out of the backpack, repeating everything the adventurers had said about taking Nagi's life. Petra said this was fascinating, because it was a recorder disguised as a bag and had an inefficient design, but Nagi just stated that it was a bag that records sounds. The girl changed the subject, speaking that she understood they betrayed and tried to take his life, but what made her curious was how a carrier like him managed to defeat 4 adventurers, and it seemed they were poisoned by the smoke mushrooms, and Nagi got happy for her knowing about them. Petra replied that she only knew enough to know that eating them in this region causes muscle rigidity, dizziness, and purplish coloration on the face. Nagi replied that this simplified things, and it turned out they simply ate a stew with mushrooms when they were about to attack him. Then the system appeared, and it was sheer luck on his part, since a mere porter couldn't handle adventurers otherwise. He questioned if he wasn't telling the truth with a threatening look. Jeff thought these words were a lie, and for sure they ate poisonous mushrooms, but it wasn't against their will since they were in his trap. Back to their fight, Nagi called for Jeff, asking if he was really a gold-level adventurer, then made a cut that Jeff managed to deflect. The hand-to-hand battle continued, with Nagi completely pressing the swordsman, who only managed to defend. Finally, both blows ended up being reflected. Jeff had thought there was something strange, because even though they spent a lot of energy against the boss monster, the idea that his group lost to a porter simply didn't make sense. Nagi started bursting into laughter, advancing over while questioning how he managed to defeat a goblin with that slow sword. Jeff tried a cut while thinking he was ashamed for being dominated by a carrier, and his provocations made him lose composure. Nagi continued with the smile on his face, dodging the blow with extreme ease while provoking him. Jeff tried one more time, however, was avoided again, then focused energy on the sword, trying one last time, again being simply dodged. Nagi mocked his blows while dodging. Jeff got even more infuriated and called him a bastard, making an arcing cut this time, but which Nagi dodged going to his back. At that time, the reason why Jeff lost to the carrier was not because he was strong, but because he got weak with his body hurting suddenly. He wondered what the hell this was, because he felt like he would vomit, and even already did that. Nagi questioned if he didn't tell him, since they were all poisoned. The food they ate had a poisonous mushroom called smoke mushroom, and it enhances the flavor of the dish, besides dealing with cheating clients. Jeff questioned about this poison, and if this is true. Then he planned to betray them from the beginning. Nagi just sighed arrogantly, questioning how a delicate carrier like him could trust suspicious adventurers, but as he said, it was just insurance. Whether the betrayal happened or not depended entirely on them, and in a situation like this, using a catalyst would make the poisonous effects come to light. But normally he would give the antidote after finishing the dungeon to completely neutralize the poison, but some idiot before that had broken his bottles when he offered. Then he questioned what he could do about it, since there was only one vial of antidote left. Jeff thought that even though that was how everything happened in this situation, saying that he poisoned them didn't seem true and confirmed the story, shouting that it was just bad luck to eat the wrong stew, reflecting that losing to a porter was humiliating. The three members of the group cried while repeating that it would be okay if they hadn't eaten that stew. Petra analyzed the situation with her finger on her chin. Then she said that now she understood the situation and was going to send these criminals to be transported. Nagi turned to leave, saying that his business was finished and he would go away, but Petra asked him to wait. If you're heading back to town, I could offer a ride. Nagi analyzes the situation for a few seconds, wondering if it would be free. On the way to the city in the carriage, Petra says it's a shame he had such an unfortunate experience right after arriving. On behalf of the Adventurers Association, she apologizes. Nagi says it was fine. Porters are used to things like that. Petra says even so, there's something he needs to know. Although she understands he wasn't to blame for the incident, they wouldn't see it that way. The adventurers he subjugated were all members of the Dawn Guild. That guild was famous there for its arrogance and lawlessness. No matter the reason, if one of their members suffers damage, they will retaliate. So for a while, he must be careful, until she becomes completely confused. Nagi had his head buried in his backpack. Petra asks if he was listening, and the boy confirms. Then something pops its head out. Nagi complains he told Gluttony not to come out in front of people because they'll freak out. Gluttony replies that it was hungry. Petra asks what in the world that was, and Nagi says not to worry about it. This little one was Gluttony, and it had been living in his bag for a long time. It organizes items inside. Before Gluttony started helping, his things were always getting tangled. In exchange, it eats tons of magic stones. Considering how chaotic this journey has been, it's also been quite busy. Besides, he managed to pocket all the dungeon loot, which would normally be divided among the 4 adventurers. So he says, since he was feeling generous, he's going to double the magic stones for today. Gluttony just eats with a happy expression. Petra says it was her first time seeing a magical creature that eats stones. Nagi says it was the same for him, but it was a beneficial relationship since it causes no harm. The inspector says he was fascinating, or rather his bag was, since she had never heard of anything like it. Suddenly, the coachman's horses rear up, stomping their hooves hard on the ground. Everyone in the carriage gets scared. Petra asks what happened to the horses suddenly. The coachman replies that he's not sure. They just got agitated all of a sudden. Nagi realizes something, turning back because he recognizes this feeling. There was no doubt about what it was. A dungeon break was happening there. Nagi calls the inspector's name, pointing in a different direction while warning that he can sense a dungeon break beyond the mountain. Petra shouts about the dungeon break. It was a huge problem, and she wants to know how he noticed and if he has some kind of magic tool. Nagi says it was just instinct. Petra questions what he means by that. The protagonist grabs a piece of wood, saying there's no time. They need to act quickly before there are casualties. Petra thinks sensing a break by instinct was absurd. Even she, as an inspector, couldn't detect it. Gluttony says it really was a dungeon break. She likes magic stones and can smell them, and that's why there is a huge smell of magic stones beyond that mountain. She is absolutely sure of it. Petra understands and says they should take a look. When a dungeon exists for a long time, it will go through a catastrophic event called a dungeon break. That's when the monsters inside come out en masse and cause an uproar, taking lives indiscriminately along their path. That was why they must subjugate the dungeons in this world. Petra says it has gone far past the critical point, and the break will happen at any moment. She wants to know how he sensed it from so far away. Nagi replies that he could never forget this sinister feeling. It's something one should never forget. His young vision was completely shocked, standing in front of a totally decimated place. That was how horrible things become when a dungeon break occurs. Petra wonders if this man has gone through this before. But even if he has, it doesn't make sense for him to be able to sense it. Nagi says there's something strange there. If a dungeon were so close to the village, there's no way adventurers wouldn't have subjugated it by now. Petra says that's right, and according to records, this dungeon has already been assigned. Nagi questions who accepted the mission and their qualifications. The girl says it was a D-rank rift dungeon, assigned to 1 mithril class adventurer and 2 copper class. Nagi wonders about a mithril adventurer for just a D rank dungeon. In that case, he has his suspicions. He questions what she will do, since he needs to go to the village to confirm something. Petra replies that it must be what he suspects, so she asks the guard to transport those criminals to prison for her. As a dungeon inspector, she will accompany him. Both stand in front of the dungeon with the village. That village was a peaceful place, but the citizens were gathered in a corner. Nagi says there is definitely something happening there. The citizens shout that it's been so long they should have solved this, but they haven't. If a dungeon break happens, Nero, copper rank, tells them to take it to the group leader. Vandeshtar agrees that it wasn't their responsibility. They want to know what the villagers expect them to do since the leader disappeared. The citizens call them bastards. Nagi thinks he was right, judging by the situation. It was a dungeon no-show. This happens when a leader of higher rank than the dungeon signs up. Then, if a better dungeon is discovered in the meantime, the leader completely abandons the low-rank dungeon. Petra says it was clear the association imposes fines in cases like this. Nagi says it was nothing more than a slap on the wrist, and the girl agrees. The protagonist thinks that's it. Adventurers can get away with just a fine, but the people there would lose everything. This dungeon will break tonight. Even if they ask the Adventurers Association for help, by the time they arrive, everything will already be in ashes. And yet these adventurers are spewing irresponsible excuses, shouting that they are also victims because they were losing their precious time, and there was no point in being blamed. If they have complaints, they must register them in the official complaint of the Adventurers Association. Since they aren't the only ones responsible, they don't need to hear this from him. Nagi thinks that adventurers aren't heroes or saviors. They are cruel people who only care about their own profit, but even so, in this situation, the power most needed was theirs because only adventurers can stop a dungeon break, not a porter like him. Petra says it was unfortunate, but they must evacuate the residents since saving lives should be the priority. Nagi questions that, because he really believes they can save it. Petra asks what he means by that, and the protagonist tells her to think. Winter was coming too, and those who lose their homes won't survive the harsh winter. That was impossible, so he removes his porter necklace. He puts on the gold one, thinking the village doesn't need a porter. Nagi bursts out laughing then, approaching while saying what's over here. A dungeon break happening in a village he just visited. He questions if anyone can subjugate the ruined dungeon without paying any fee, and Petra confirms. The protagonist says it was great luck. Meanwhile, Vandeshtar questions who this guy is to plan on facing the dungeon, until they notice the color of the badge. It was a gold rank adventurer, so it might actually be possible. Nagi asks if they were thinking of participating too. In that case, the reward split was 9-1, a dungeon that had breaks. It was a dungeon connected to an unknown dimension through a rift. It's recommended that only adventurers of at least gold rank or higher enter, unlike normal dungeons, regardless of their difficulty, which can be simply completed by defeating all monsters. In a rift dungeon, your true enemy is space itself. Even experienced adventurers can't predict the clear conditions. The risks of disappearing or losing your life are higher, making this the most avoided dungeon type. And yet, they are about to do a speedrun. Petra warns that after checking the magic limit, this dungeon will break in an hour. Nagi replies that in other words, they need to complete it in an hour. But within an hour, no matter what appears, it's going to be tight, especially if it's a rift dungeon. They can only hope it's an easy dungeon, since they can't waste a single minute or second. They must go there immediately. Inside the dungeon, an entrance seems to break, illuminating Nero's eyes. It was a desert with dozens of floating rocks. Nero comments that a moment ago it was night, but now they are in another world. Vandeshtar says the rookie's first subjugation begins, and the girl agrees they should show those bastards from the association. The necromancer claims he's going to put on such a performance that the association won't know what to say. Watching from afar, Petra thinks that ignorance really is bliss sometimes. One look was all it took to know they were doomed. Nagi agreed. The scene unfolding before them seemed like it was being written in real time. Petra says they need to climb it within an hour. She yells that he had to lie, but Nagi says he had no choice. If they asked for help as porters, the adventurers would just ignore them. But if a gold rank adventurer leads, others will follow. It was risky, but if they don't destroy this dungeon, a rupture will occur, and she knew that. Petra confirms. Yes, it needs to be stopped. Nero starts laughing. She asks why all the worry. This is exactly why humans are so boring. She plants her feet firmly. Leaping from rock to rock, she announces she'll climb to the top alone without any issues. Vandeshtar calls out that it's dangerous. Nero materializes fire at her wrists, using it for a boost. But that wasn't her intention. and she gets scared. Suddenly, she falls face first onto the ground. Van Deshtar asks if she's stupid, acting without thinking just like in boot camp. Nero asks if he just ignored her. The necromancer tells her to remember their training. Rift dungeons can have restrictions or curses. Petra confirms that's exactly it. The first step in any Rift dungeon is identifying its curse. She uses her scout talent, and chains reveal themselves on Van Deshtar and Nero. Petra explains this must be the dungeon's curse. They are all bound by these intangible, invisible chains, meaning they have to move together. Nagi notes that it seems tricks and shortcuts won't work in this dungeon. Fortunately, he brought plenty of climbing gear, which impresses Nero. The protagonist tells them they need to take it step by step. That is the key to clearing a trick-based dungeon. They shouldn't waste energy, but they can't go too slow either. They need to maintain a balanced pace. Nagi tells them to follow his lead. He reminds them that since they are chained, they can't let the distance between them get too wide. They need to maintain a consistent gap while moving. Nero complains the leader is too slow and says she'll run ahead to scout. Nagi immediately shuts that down. Rushing ahead is far worse than moving a bit slower, but planning a clear route without backtracking. Of course, even if you map the route carefully, the problem is that Rift dungeons are always full of unpredictable variables. They come face to face with an immense stone pig. The creature opens its mouth and eats a rock. Nagi thinks the path is completely blocked, all because of an unknown monster. Petra identifies the monster as a rock-devouring pig. It's powerful but not aggressive. As long as they don't provoke it, they'll be fine. Just like the compendium says, it digests quickly. It constantly eats and expels, altering the dungeon's layout as it moves. This ecosystem is fascinating, even if it is her first time seeing one. Back to the issue at hand. This is a problem because the platform they were going to climb has completely disappeared. Their only option now is to throw the grappling hook and attach the rope to the stone pig. But if they miss and provoke the pig, it could become aggressive. They don't have the time or energy to fight it. Van Deshtar says that's the problem. Finally, it's his time to shine. He tells everyone to watch closely as he uses his powers. They must witness how he overcomes this challenge. He throws 2 fingers. His necromancer talent is finger summoning. They begin to take on 2 humanoid shapes. The bone golems appear, Slyordy and Clubby. Nagi notes that it's impressive. Summoning skills like that are very rare. Petra adds that they can secure the rope without provoking the stone pig. But the protagonist questions why they look. The 2 golems begin to tremble and contort. Nagi continues, saying they look strange. Nero explains that he's been famous since training camp as Explosive Van. He's known for his lack of control over summons that tend to blow up. Van Deshtar says controlling summons is like looking in a mirror and trying to move both sides separately. Still, as long as they cross in under 5 minutes, it should be fine. Nagi says it'll be a bit risky, but they have no time to waste. They need to cross before they explode. He throws the rope toward the golems. They use teamwork to support themselves on the platform, but the rope ends up hitting the golem's face. Van Deshtar feels the pain. He yells at him to be careful because his nerves are linked to the summon, so he feels it too. Nagi starts climbing the rope. He thinks that for a high-level dungeon, they got a little lucky. His companion's skills are well suited for this dungeon, especially the summon, which makes clearing it much easier. Nagi thinks something is wrong. There are only 3 minutes left. Van Deshtar tells him to hurry because the situation isn't good, but the protagonist says the summon looks weird. The necromancer apologizes. It's going to explode. The crack in its head made it unstable. He was already nauseous and now he can't hold it back anymore. The golem's body begins to swell. It causes a massive explosion right there, affecting the rock-devouring pig. The monster is startled by it. The rope begins falling toward the ground. The group is heading that way too. Nagi shouts that they're doomed. They have to grab onto something, but he realizes if they fall back to the starting point, there's no way they'll reach the top. Now he needs to reduce damage somehow by moving quickly mid-air. Nagi uses a secret porter technique. It's called airbag, making the group land on top of the bag. With that, they are launched upward. Nagi uses the pig as support. He pulls his backpack up to the top as well. He asks if everyone is okay. Petra confirms they are, thanks to him, but their progress took a major hit. They still need to reach the top within the time limit. Nagi says they have no choice if they want to make it on time. From now on, the 2 adventurers will have to match his stamina. He pulls out a special porter tool, the sticky climbing set. He tells everyone to get ready. They are headed straight for the top. They cannot let their guard down for a single second. If one falls, they all fall together, and the closer they get to the top, the more dangerous it will be. Nagi approaches the rockfall zone. Next, they move onto the icy surface. They even pass through a resistance zone against monkeys. Finally, they reach an explosive rock zone. The 2 adventurers are completely exhausted and ask if they're there yet. Nagi says they're almost there, just a little bit more, but the adventurers complain that's the 10th time he said that. Nero complains that she wants to fight monsters. She didn't become an adventurer to be a mountain climber. Nagi says says this time he's serious. You can see the top from here. It seems the boss monster is waiting up there. The two adventurers are happy about the boss monster. They're going to crush the monster and wipe the smile off the association's face for ranking them as copper. Nagi thinks he understands. Based on their physical abilities and talent, they don't belong in the copper class. It's probably because necromancers are looked down upon, and beast people only recently gained freedom from slavery. Nero says that in the worst case scenario, the leader will handle it. Van confirms, since he's a gold rank. Meanwhile, Nagi just reflects that he brought those two along specifically to handle the monster, but Petra asks them to wait a moment. Something seems strange here. The boss monster at the top is a serpent dragon, but they shouldn't be purple. If a serpent dragon is purple, it can only mean one thing. It's already dead. Nagi questions what she just said. A sword is already lodged in the dragon's body. The man up there yawns, waking quickly from his sleep. He asks what all that noise is. He looks down, surprised. Then he starts staring coldly at the group. Nagi thinks, this is killing intent. He begins to resist. The adventurer jumps toward the rock in a split second. He gets close to the stone while Nagi just barely dodges the advance. The adventurer lands incredibly fast. The protagonist notices the medallion on his chest, thinking it's mithril rank, and if that's true, this can't be just a simple dungeon failure. The adventurer remarks that this is going to be a hassle. He didn't expect anyone to enter this dungeon, seeing as it needs to be broken. Nagi thinks that sometimes there are people like this who intentionally cause dungeons to break. The adventurer states that officially, the four of them lost their lives during the expedition. Petra confronts the adventurer head-on. She warns that the dungeon is about to rupture, and it's an adventurer's first duty to stop it, but he just questions that obligation. Then he bursts out laughing. He says he doesn't care about duties. Adventurers act for their own benefit, after all. A dungeon break can be way more profitable than clearing one. Nagi thinks he gets it now. He never thought of adventurers as heroes or saviors, but he didn't expect trash like this. If this guy really intends to cause a dungeon break, Nagi has to stop him no matter what. However, the guy is ranked mithril. Fighting him now is asking to lose. Nagi takes off his backpack, claiming there's been a misunderstanding. They're just passing adventurers who happen to find the dungeon. They didn't want to get in the way, so he should consider this buzzing skewer an apology gift. Staying in the dungeon must have made him hungry. Nagi thinks fighting this piece of trash directly won't work. He has to weaken him first. The adventurer quickly bites into the skewer. He yells that it's incredible and hot, like it just came out of the oven. It really was impressive to be able to make this. The meat is perfectly grilled, and the shrimp is just right. Nagi thinks he should eat his fill, since the food contains his poison. But the adventurer grabs his shoulder tightly. He mentions the exquisite taste of smoked mushrooms added to the sauce especially. He asks if Nagi thought such a cheap trick would work. Then he prepares his payment, winding up his fist. The punch approaches Nagi's face. The protagonist manages to defend, but is thrown far back by the recoil. Nero grabs the chain with her wrist, but suddenly she's pulled backward. Her foot is forced back, enduring the pull of the chain as she calls out to the team leader. Nagi lands on another rock. Nero asks what they should do now. The adventurer remarks they must be rookies who can't even break curse chains. Just bad luck. Nero turns quickly at that, but that adventurer rushes at her, yelling that this dungeon will be her last. He tries to punch the girl. Van Destar steps forward, telling Nero not to just stand there. An immense explosion of smoke appears on the spot. It slowly begins to dissipate, with the adventurer emerging from it with a sigh. He asks what's up with this rude summoned creature. He wants to know if the rookie is a necromancer. Van Destar asks if he was the one, the group leader who got approval to enter the dungeon but gave up. The mithril rank adventurer replies he wanted to know who volunteered for this dungeon everyone avoids. So it was them, a necromancer and a beast woman. No wonder people said it was a bunch of idiots. Van Destar tells Nero not to worry. When the leader returns, it will be 3 against 1. All they have to do is wait until then. Especially against physical attacks, his patchwork golem can withstand a lot. Just like they practiced on the training field, they advance against the adventurer. That man keeps the smile on his face. He causes another explosion there, while Nagi stays on another rock. The boy was unconscious for a moment, but he wakes up a few instants later, muttering. Petra asks if Nagi is really okay. She's already performed first aid for now. The protagonist thanks her, realizing he must have blacked out for a moment. He asks about the situation. The girl replies, it's not good at all. Nero and Van Destar are holding firm, but they are constantly being overpowered by the adventurer. He defends against a kick from Nero. The girl pulls back and spins with her kick once more. However, all are blocked with ease. The adventurer continues with the evil smile on his face. Then he spins the patchwork golem in his hand, striking and repelling both of them to stop the fight. Petra continues that, as expected, the opponent is too strong for them to last much longer. Nagi replies he made a mistake. He should have considered that poison wouldn't work on someone of mithril rank. He asks if she could tell him more about the guy. as he must have a reputation. Petra confirms. Among mithril rank adventurers, he is considered unrivaled in close combat. His history of dungeon attacks is also impressive, and he's famous for frequent confrontations with other adventurers, making him skilled in duels, especially his mastery of the huge broadsword. He was famous for cutting even an ogre in half with a single blow. Nagi says it's at least a relief he doesn't have one right now. He hoped to hear about some kind of weakness, but there's no way. Petra says the biggest problem is that even if they manage to defeat him by pure luck, time is running out. It's a race against the clock. Even if their destination is right ahead, there's no way to get there in time. If this chain curse didn't exist, they could have split up and run to the summit. Nagi repeats the chain curse and thinks that's exactly it. They can't see or touch them, but they were all tied by chains. And that's also the detriment. If one of them falls, everyone goes together. But if you think differently, it could also mean a benefit. If one person reaches the top, everyone arrives. If there's a way to use this benefit, maybe they can defeat the mithril adventurer and save time. Even if it's fake, Nagi was still the leader now. If he were the real leader, he'd use every card he has to the max. Individually, none of them are impressive. But if they combine their tools, their abilities, and everything they have, maybe they could change this. So he asks if Petra, with her scout talent, can map the terrain of their destination from this distance. The girl says it's simple, and she could even create a complete map. Nagi tells her to please do it as fast as she can. Petra pulls out a quill and uses her scout talent to write in the air, creating a 3D map of that whole area. The protagonist is impressed by this, saying the level of detail in the map was beyond his expectations. She must be a top-tier inspector. Petra replies these were just basics. She made the map for him, but she doesn't exactly know how he plans to use it. Nagi answers they would use it to take down the beast. This wasn't a battle between humans, but a fight between a human and a beast. When adventurers explore dungeons, they often encounter monsters much stronger than themselves. He asks how they managed to defeat these beasts. Petra replies that maybe using their experience to create strategies. Nagi responds that is incorrect. The secret for adventurers to defeat monsters stronger than them is to use dissimulation. They win by fighting dirty. So, to take down that beast, Nagi jumps back toward the rock, drawing a bow from his backpack. He fires at the adventurer while thinking that they have to play dirty too. The arrow approaches very quickly. The mithril rank adventurer just watches and catches it immediately. He says that even a sneak attack must be effective with these rudimentary arrows. But suddenly an explosion happens. Nagi had used the carrier's secret technique, sticky spider line. The adventurer replies that this was a drag, but the protagonist advances while pulling something from his backpack. That man questions a direct combat. He was finally starting to feel motivated. Nagi uses the carrier's secret technique to launch dozens of mushrooms. The adventurer looks up in surprise. The mushrooms burst into a storm of smoke. The adventurer defends himself from the smoke, asking if he covered the whole area with this. He really was a bastard. On the other side, Deshtar sighs, panting. Nagi asks if everyone is okay, and both confirm. The protagonist continues that he is happy. He asks if Deshtar can summon more golems. The boy replies that his index and middle fingers are regenerating, and he just used his ring finger, so he can still use his pinky and thumb. Nagi replies that should be more than enough. They need to listen carefully because there is a way to turn this situation around. The adventurer finally frees himself from the webs. He says it was a persistent nuisance. He's never heard of a swordsman fighting like this. He wonders if he escaped with his companions to another rock, but fighting is useless. However, he sees a figure in the smoke with a backpack. He keeps muttering as if in conversation. The adventurer says this is pathetic. All that smoke is useless if he makes all that noise. He advances with his fist. His blow was imbued with energy. He strikes the golem's head, causing an immense explosion on the spot. The adventurer keeps his smile on his face until he realizes what actually happened. He had hit a golem. This same being grabs him quickly. The adventurer asks about the patchwork golem. He wants to know how the golem was talking, but it wasn't him. It was the bag making all the noise. Saying he was caught now, the adventurer turns, questioning where the others went, until he notices a figure holding the rope. Nagi stood in front of him as the smoke cleared. The adventurer realized he planned to sneak to the top while distracting him, but the attempt was too sloppy. Now realizing he won't be able to climb using that rock, Nagi asks if he's sure about that. Deshtar's mouth hangs open. Nagi asks if it's here yet. They've been spotted and need to hurry. The boy asks for just a little longer since it was his first time controlling it from such a distance, but he shouldn't worry about that. His pinky finger was caught on the hook. Then it begins to take shape, turning into a patchwork teddy bear. Deshtar confirms he'll do it for sure. The patchwork golem steps onto the castle, pulling the hook as far as it can, approaching the already defeated dragon. Then it jumps as its final move. Deshtar yells to go now. Finally, the hook is embedded. The golem explodes immediately after, causing an immense radius of destruction on the castle. The adventurer is incredulous. They rigged all this just to keep him stuck in one place, and it was dangerous. Using strength to break free from the golem, since he just needs to get out as fast as he can. Deshtar replies that won't be easy. The thumb might be slow, but it was the strongest of them all. Nagi keeps holding the rope, looking coldly at the adventurer, reminding him this was a battle against a beast. The dragon on top of the castle starts being pulled. There are beasts that cannot be defeated if your goal wasn't to take down the monster. The dragon falls with its mouth open toward the adventurer, breaking that stone floor and making the adventurer fall toward the ground. The rope was caught on the dragon's scales. Then it starts pulling the rope upward like a lever, lifting the whole group. Nagi thinks there's no need to fight against this as he climbs with his friends. Upon reaching the last island, everyone in the group keeps running. Nagi shouts that they just need to hold on a little longer. They were almost at the end of the dungeon. They're sure about 5 minutes remaining. It was tough, but they can make it. Still, they owe a lot to Nero for her help. If it were up to him, he couldn't